The blood on Tessa Cameron's hands had dried 3 days ago, but she could still feel its weight as she pressed herself against the rough wooden slats of the barn, listening to the heavy footsteps of the cowboy who owned this place walk past without knowing she existed. She had stumbled onto the property outside Ash Fork, Arizona in the dead of night 2 weeks earlier, fleeing from something she could barely speak aloud even in the privacy of her own mind. The barn had seemed like salvation then, a temporary shelter where she could catch her breath and figure out what to do next. But days had turned into weeks, and Tessa had developed a careful rhythm of survival. She knew the cowboy's schedule now, knew when he fed his horses at dawn and when he returned to the main house for supper. She slept in the hay loft where the shadows were deepest, and she only moved when she was certain he was far enough away not to hear the whisper of her movements. The Arizona summer of 1882 was merciless, even in the relative cool of the barn. Tessa had fashioned a nest for herself among the hay bales, and she survived on water from the horse trough when the moon was high and the world was sleeping. Sometimes she found half-eaten apples the horses had rejected, or a forgotten biscuit wrapped in cloth that the cowboy had left behind. It was not much, but it was more than she had expected when she fled into the night with nothing but the clothes on her back and terror in her heart. She had killed a man. Not murdered, she told herself in the long hours of darkness. Self-defense was different. But try explaining that to a corrupt sheriff who had been best friends with the man whose skull she had cracked open with a cast-iron skillet. Try explaining that Thomas Wilkes had been forcing himself on her, that her screams had gone unanswered, that she had grabbed the only weapon within reach. The law would not see it her way, not in a town where Wilkes owned half the businesses and the other half owed him money. So Tessa had run, and she had hidden, and now she lived like a ghost in a stranger's barn. The cowboy who owned the place was named Travis Cole, though Tessa had only learned this by listening to the conversations he had with the occasional visitor. He seemed to be a solitary man, working a modest ranch on the outskirts of Ash Fork with just a handful of horses and cattle. He was young, maybe 25 or 26, with a lean build and sun-darkened skin that spoke of long days under the Arizona sky. Tessa watched him sometimes through the gaps in the wood, studying the way he moved with an easy confidence, the way he spoke gently to his animals. There was a kindness in him that she recognized, a decency that made her chest ache with something she could not name. She told herself she would leave soon. Every day she promised herself that tomorrow would be the day she slipped away and continued her journey to somewhere, anywhere that was far from the memory of Thomas Wilkes's blood pooling on the kitchen floor. But every tomorrow became another today, and Tessa remained. It was hunger that nearly gave her away. 2 weeks of surviving on scraps had left Tessa weak and light-headed. She had always been slender, but now her dress hung on her frame like a sack, and when she stood too quickly, the world spun in dizzying circles. She knew she needed real food, something more substantial than stolen apple cores and stale bread. So one evening, when Travis had gone into town for supplies, Tessa made the dangerous decision to slip into the main house. Her hands trembled as she pushed open the back door. The house was small but well kept, with simple furniture and clean floors. Tessa moved quickly to the kitchen, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She found a loaf of bread on the counter, still fresh, and she tore into it with desperate fingers. There was salt pork in the pantry, and she wrapped several pieces in a cloth napkin. A jar of preserved peaches sat on a shelf, and though Tessa knew she should not take something so valuable, her hunger won out over her conscience. She was halfway back to the door when she heard the sound of a horse approaching. Panic seized her. Travis was not supposed to be back yet. The sun had barely set. Tessa looked around wildly, clutching her stolen food to her chest. She could not make it back to the barn without being seen, not with him coming up the main path. Her only option was to hide inside the house and pray he did not notice anything amiss. Tessa darted into a small room off the kitchen that appeared to be a study of sorts. There was a desk covered in papers and a bookshelf crammed with worn volumes. She pressed herself into the corner behind the door, trying to make herself as small as possible, and waited. Travis's footsteps crossed the porch. The front door opened and closed. Tessa heard him moving through the house, his boots heavy on the wooden floors. She held her breath, not daring to move even as her legs began to cramp from her awkward position. "Damn it," she heard him mutter from the kitchen. Her stomach dropped. He had noticed the missing food. There was a long silence, and then Travis called out, his voice carrying through the house. "I know someone is here." Tessa squeezed her eyes shut. Maybe if she stayed perfectly still, he would think he was mistaken. "I have been finding signs for over a week now," Travis continued, and Tessa's blood turned to ice. "Tracks too small to be a man's. Hay rearranged in the loft, water level in the trough lower than it should be." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentler. "I am not going to hurt you, but you need to come out." For a long moment, Tessa considered her options. She could try to run, but she was weak from hunger and he would catch her easily. She could stay hidden, but clearly he already knew she was here. Or she could trust the kindness she had heard in his voice, the gentleness she had observed from afar. Slowly, moving like a cornered animal, Tessa stepped out from behind the door. Travis Cole stood in the doorway of the study, one hand resting on the frame. He was taller than she had realized, with dark brown hair that curled slightly at the ends and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. He looked at her with an expression of surprise mixed with something else, concern perhaps, as he took in her hollow cheeks and the desperate way she clutched the stolen food. "How long have you been living in my barn?" he asked. Tessa lifted her chin, trying to summon some dignity. 2 weeks. Travis let out a slow breath. 2 weeks, and I never knew. He shook his head, then seemed to really look at her, seeing the exhaustion in every line of her body, the fear in her eyes. "Are you in trouble?" "Yes," Tessa whispered, because there was no point in lying now. "Are you being followed?" "I do not know. Maybe." Travis was quiet for a moment, his jaw working as he considered this. Then he said something that Tessa had not expected. "Stay inside." She blinked. "What?" "Stay inside," Travis repeated, his voice firm but not unkind. "If someone is looking for you, the barn is not safe. The house is. I have good locks on the doors and windows, and I am here most nights." He gestured at the food she held. "And you clearly need to eat real meals, not whatever scraps you have been surviving on." Tessa stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "You are offering me shelter." "I am offering you safety," Travis corrected. "Whatever trouble you are running from, you do not deserve to starve or sleep in a hay loft." He stepped back, giving her space. "There is a spare room upstairs. It is not much, but it has a bed and a door that locks from the inside. You can stay there until you figure out your next move." "Why would you do this?" Tessa asked, her voice cracking. "You do not even know me." Travis met her eyes, and there was something unflinching in his gaze. "I know what it looks like when someone is desperate and scared, and I know that leaving you to fend for yourself would make me no better than whoever it is you are running from." He turned toward the kitchen. "Now come eat something before you collapse. We can talk about the details after you have food in your stomach." Tessa followed him in a daze, still clutching the bread and salt pork like a lifeline. Travis pulled out a chair at the small kitchen table and pointed at it, and she sat because her legs no longer seemed capable of holding her upright. He moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency. slicing more bread and frying the salt pork in a cast iron skillet. The smell made Tessa's mouth water so intensely she had to swallow hard to keep from drooling. When he set the plate in front of her, she fell on it like a woman possessed. Travis watched her for a moment, then quietly poured her a glass of water and sat down across from her. "Slow down," he said gently. "You will make yourself sick." Tessa forced herself to take smaller bites, though every instinct screamed at her to consume as much as possible before this strange kindness was snatched away. When she had emptied the plate, Travis refilled it without comment. It was only after the second helping that Tessa finally felt the gnawing ache in her stomach begin to ease. "Thank you," she managed, her voice hoarse. Travis nodded. "What is your name?" Tessa Cameron." "Travis Cole," he said, though she already knew this. "Where are you from, Tessa?" She hesitated. "A town about 60 miles east of here. I would rather not say which one." "That is fair." Travis leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Are you wanted by the law?" Tessa's hands clenched in her lap. "Probably, but not for anything I am ashamed of." He seemed to consider this. "Did you hurt someone?" "Yes," she said quietly, "but he was hurting me first, and he would not stop." Understanding flickered across Travis's face, followed by something darker, angrier. "I see." "The sheriff will not believe me," Tessa continued, the words tumbling out now that she had started. "The man I hurt, he was important, rich, connected. They will hang me if they find me, or worse." She looked down at her hands, at the faint stains she could still see under her fingernails. "So I ran." Travis was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You can stay here as long as you need to. But you have to stay inside the house during the day. If anyone comes by, you need to hide. Can you do that?" Tessa nodded, tears burning in her eyes. "Why are you helping me?" "Because it is the right thing to do," Travis said simply. He stood and began clearing the dishes. "The spare room is at the top of the stairs, first door on the left. There should be some spare blankets in the chest at the foot of the bed. Get some rest. We can figure out the rest tomorrow." Tessa climbed the stairs on shaking legs, feeling as though she had stepped into some kind of dream. The spare room was small and plain, with a narrow bed and a single window that looked out over the darkening desert. She lay down without bothering to remove her filthy dress, and for the first time in weeks, she slept without fear. The next morning, Tessa woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. For a moment, she could not remember where she was. Then it all came flooding back: Travis's unexpected kindness, the food, the offer of safety. She sat up slowly, her body aching from weeks of sleeping on hay. When she made her way downstairs, Travis was in the kitchen scrambling eggs. He glanced at her and nodded toward the table. "There is coffee in the pot. Help yourself." Tessa poured a cup with trembling hands and sat down. The coffee was strong and bitter, and it was the best thing she had tasted in weeks. Travis set a plate of eggs and biscuits in front of her, then took his own seat. They ate in silence for a few minutes before he spoke. "I have been thinking about your situation." Tessa set down her fork. "And?" "You cannot stay hidden forever," Travis said. "Eventually someone will come by and see you, or you will need to go into town for something. We need to come up with a story, something that explains who you are and why you are here." "What kind of story?" Travis rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "We could say you are my cousin, come to help with the housework, or a widow I hired to cook and clean." He paused. "Or we could say you are my wife." Tessa nearly choked on her coffee. "Your wife?" "It is just an idea," Travis said quickly, his ears turning red. "But married women get asked fewer questions, and it would explain why you are living here." "But we do not even know each other," Tessa protested. "True, but desperate times call for desperate measures." Travis met her eyes. "I am not suggesting anything improper." You would still have your own room, and I would not expect anything from you except to keep up the pretense in public. It is just a way to keep you safe." Tessa turned this over in her mind. It was a crazy idea, but then again, her entire situation was crazy. And Travis had a point about married women attracting less attention. "What would you get out of this arrangement?" Travis shrugged. "A clean house and decent meals, I suppose, and the satisfaction of knowing I helped someone who needed it." There had to be more to it than that, Tessa thought. No one was this selflessly kind, but when she looked into Travis's eyes, she saw only earnestness and a quiet determination. He genuinely wanted to help her, and he expected nothing in return. "All right," Tessa said finally. "We will tell people we are married, but only if you are sure about this. If they find out you are harboring me, you could get in trouble too." "Let me worry about that," Travis said. He stood and began clearing the dishes. "For now, you focus on recovering your strength. There is a wash basin and some soap in the bathing room off the kitchen. I will see if I can find some clothes that might fit you better than what you are wearing." Over the following days, Tessa slowly began to feel human again. She bathed and washed her hair, marveling at how much better it felt to be clean. Travis had found an old trunk in the attic containing clothes that had belonged to his mother, he explained, and though they were a bit out of fashion, they fit Tessa reasonably well. She took over the cooking and cleaning without being asked, partly because she felt obligated to earn her keep and partly because it gave her something to do besides worry about being discovered. Travis, for his part, treated her with unfailing courtesy and respect. He never pressed her for details about her past, and he never made her feel like an imposition. They fell into an easy routine, rising early to share breakfast before Travis went out to tend his animals and work the land. Tessa spent her days cleaning, cooking, and reading from Travis's small collection of books. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the desert, making idle conversation about everything and nothing. It was during one of these evening talks that Tessa first began to see Travis as something more than just a kind stranger. He was telling her about how he had come to own the ranch, how his father had died when Travis was 19 and left him everything. "It was hard at first," he admitted. "I did not know much about running a ranch, and there were plenty of people who thought I would fail. But I was stubborn and I learned." He smiled, a little self-deprecating. "Sometimes I think stubbornness is my only real talent." "I think you are selling yourself short," Tessa said. "It takes more than stubbornness to build something like this." Travis looked at her, something warm flickering in his eyes. "Maybe, or maybe I just got lucky." Tessa felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear or anxiety. She looked away, suddenly flustered. This was dangerous territory. She could not afford to develop feelings for Travis, not when their entire relationship was built on a lie and her presence put him at risk. But as the days turned into weeks, Tessa found it increasingly difficult to maintain that emotional distance. Travis was easy to be around, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and a thoughtfulness that showed itself in small gestures. He noticed when she was having a hard day and would leave wildflowers on the kitchen table. He taught her how to ride one of his gentler horses, patiently correcting her form and laughing when she nearly fell off. He sat up with her one night when she had a nightmare about Thomas Wilkes, not asking questions, just making coffee and letting her talk if she wanted to. Tessa had never known a man could be like this, kind and patient and utterly without expectation. The men in her life before had been hard and demanding, taking what they wanted and giving nothing back. Travis was different. Travis was everything she had not known she needed. One afternoon in late August, about 6 weeks after Travis had found Tessa in his house, a rider approached the ranch. Tessa was in the kitchen kneading bread dough when she heard the horse's hoofbeats. She immediately wiped her hands on her apron and moved away from the window, her heart racing. Travis had warned her this would happen eventually, that visitors were inevitable, but they had been lucky so far. She heard Travis greet the visitor, his voice casual and relaxed. A man's voice responded, asking about buying a horse. Tessa exhaled slowly. Just a potential customer, nothing to worry about. She forced herself to return to the bread dough, trying to focus on the rhythm of kneading. But then she heard Travis call out, "Tessa, we have a guest. Can you bring out some water?" For a moment, Tessa froze. Then she realized what Travis was doing. He was establishing her presence, making it clear that she belonged here. She quickly poured 2 glasses of water from the pitcher and carried them outside, keeping her head down and her expression neutral. The visitor was a middle-aged rancher from a neighboring property, weather-beaten and gruff. He looked at Tessa with curiosity but no suspicion. "Did not know you had gotten hitched, Cole." "Just recently," Travis said smoothly, taking one of the glasses from Tessa. "Tessa, this is Frank Morrison." "Frank, my wife Tessa." The word wife still sent a jolt through Tessa every time she heard it, but she managed a polite nod. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Morrison." Frank tipped his hat. "Madam, you are a lucky woman. Cole here is one of the more decent fellows in these parts." "I know," Tessa said, and she was surprised to realize she meant it. Frank stayed for about half an hour, looking over Travis's horses and eventually agreeing to buy a young mare. When he finally rode off, Tessa let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Travis came back into the house and found her standing in the kitchen, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. "You did well," he said gently. "I was terrified," Tessa admitted. "I know, but you hid it well." Travis moved closer, close enough that Tessa could feel the warmth radiating from him. "It will get easier, I promise." Tessa turned to face him, and suddenly the space between them felt charged with something electric. She could see the concern in Travis's eyes, but there was something else too, something that made her pulse quicken. For a moment she thought he might reach for her, and she was shocked to realize how much she wanted him to. But Travis stepped back, clearing his throat. "I should get back to work. Let me know if you need anything." He left before Tessa could respond, and she was grateful for it. She needed time to sort through the confusing tangle of emotions in her chest. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, Travis said quietly, "I have been thinking about your situation, about what happens next." Tessa felt her stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" "You cannot hide here forever," Travis said. "And I do not want you to feel like you have to. But I also do not want you to run again, to end up alone and vulnerable somewhere else." He turned to look at her. "What I am trying to say badly is that you can stay here as long as you want, permanently, if that is what you want." "As your pretend wife," Tessa said slowly. "Or as my real wife if you were willing." Travis's voice was steady, but Tessa could hear the nervousness underneath. "I know we have not known each other long, and I know this whole situation is unusual, but I care about you, Tessa. These past weeks, having you here, it has been good, better than good. I want you to stay not because you are running from something, but because you want to be here, with me." Tessa's breath caught. "Travis, I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything right now," Travis said quickly. "Just think about it. I am not going to pressure you or expect anything, but I wanted you to know how I feel." Tessa looked out at the desert, at the vast expanse of stars overhead. A few months ago, her life had been entirely different. She had been trapped in a terrible situation, had made a desperate choice, had run with no plan and no hope. And now here she was, sitting on a porch with a good man who was offering her not just safety but a future. "I care about you too," Tessa said softly, "but I am afraid." "Of what?" of bringing danger to your door, of ruining your life, of not being enough. Tessa's voice cracked. I killed a man, Travis. I have blood on my hands. I am not sure I am the kind of person who deserves happiness. Travis reached over and took her hand, his grip firm and warm. That man hurt you and you defended yourself. That does not make you a killer, Tessa. It makes you a survivor. He squeezed her hand gently. And you deserve every bit of happiness you can find. We all do. Tessa turned to him, tears streaming down her face. How can you be so sure? Because I see you, Travis said simply. I see how hard you work, how kind you are to the animals, how you leave food out for the barn cats even though you do not think I notice. I see your strength and your courage, and I think you are remarkable. He smiled, a little crooked. And I think I might be falling in love with you. Tessa's heart felt like it might burst. I think I might be falling in love with you too, she whispered. Travis leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. But Tessa did not pull away. She met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle and tentative, a question more than a demand, and Tessa answered it by wrapping her arms around Travis's neck and pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Travis rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes, then? It is a maybe, Tessa said, laughing through her tears. Let me think about it a little longer. This is a big decision. Take all the time you need, Travis murmured, and he kissed her again. Over the next few weeks, Tessa found herself thinking constantly about Travis's proposal. She watched him as he worked, noting the care he took with everything he did, the patience he showed even when things went wrong. She thought about the life they could build together, the possibility of a real future instead of just running and hiding. But she also thought about the risk. If someone from her past came looking for her, if the law caught up with her, Travis would be implicated too. Could she really ask him to take that chance? It was early September when the decision was taken out of her hands. Tessa was hanging laundry in the backyard when she heard horses approaching. It was not unusual for people to come by the ranch, but something about the sound made her uneasy. She quickly finished pinning the last sheet and hurried back toward the house, staying out of sight. Through the window, she watched as 3 men rode up to where Travis was working near the barn. They were strangers, hard-looking men with guns on their hips. Tessa's blood ran cold when she recognized the tallest one. He was a deputy from her hometown, a man named Jack Henley who had worked closely with the corrupt sheriff. She heard Travis greet the men politely, asking what he could do for them. Jack Henley said something Tessa could not quite hear, and Travis shook his head. Then Henley pulled out a piece of paper, a wanted poster, and Tessa's stomach dropped. Travis looked at the poster for a long moment, then handed it back. Have not seen her, he said clearly, but I will keep an eye out. You sure about that? Henley pressed. Woman like this, running scared, she would be looking for a place to hide, and you live out here all alone. Not anymore, Travis said. I got married a couple months back. If a strange woman had shown up, my wife would have mentioned it. Henley looked skeptical. That's so. Where is this wife of yours? Inside, working, Travis said, his voice cool. And I would appreciate it if you did not disturb her. She is not used to rough company. Tessa's heart was pounding so hard she thought she might be sick. If Henley insisted on seeing her if he came inside, it was over. She would be dragged back to face a sham trial and a noose, and Travis would be arrested for harboring a fugitive. But Travis stood his ground, his posture relaxed but his eyes hard. If you are done here, gentlemen, I have work to get back to. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then Henley shrugged and tucked the poster back into his saddlebag. If you see anything, you let us know. There is a reward for information leading to her capture. I will keep that in mind, Travis said flatly. The three men rode off, and Tessa sagged against the wall, shaking. Travis waited until they were out of sight, then strode quickly into the house. He found Tessa in the kitchen, pale and trembling. "They are looking for me," she said unnecessarily. "I know." Travis pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "But they are gone now, and they did not suspect anything." "They will be back," Tessa said, her voice muffled against his chest. "Or they will send others. Travis, I have to leave. I cannot put you in danger like this." "You are not going anywhere," Travis said firmly. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "Listen to me, Tessa. Those men are not going to find you, and even if they do come back, I will protect you." "You cannot protect me from the law," Tessa said desperately. "They will arrest both of us." "Then we will leave," Travis said. "We will go somewhere they will not find us. California, maybe, or Colorado. I can sell the ranch and we can start over somewhere new." He cupped her face in his hands. "I am not losing you, Tessa. Not to them, not to anyone. You would give up everything for me," Tessa whispered. "Everything and more," Travis said, and he meant it. "You are more important than this ranch or this town or anything else. So marry me, Tessa, for real this time. Marry me and let me keep you safe." Tessa looked into his eyes and saw nothing but love and determination. This man, who had every reason to turn her away, who had every right to protect himself first, was offering to sacrifice everything for her. How could she say no to that? How could she walk away from the only person who had ever made her feel truly safe? "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you." Travis kissed her hard, pouring all his relief and love into it. When they broke apart, he was grinning. "We will go into Ash Fork tomorrow and find a preacher. Get it done properly." "Tomorrow?" Tessa laughed shakily. "That is fast." "I have waited long enough," Travis said. "And besides, the sooner we make it legal, the harder it will be for anyone to question it." The next morning they rode into Ash Fork together. Tessa wore one of the better dresses from the trunk, and Travis had slicked his hair back and put on his good shirt. They found the local preacher, a kindly old man named Reverend Walsh, at the small church on the edge of town. Travis explained that they wanted to be married right away, and the Reverend raised an eyebrow but did not refuse. "I will need 2 witnesses," he said. Travis went out into the street and convinced 2 passers-by to serve as witnesses, a shopkeeper and his wife who looked delighted at the prospect of attending a wedding. The ceremony was brief and simple, conducted in the dusty church with sunlight streaming through the plain glass windows. Tessa's hands shook as Travis slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, one he had bought from the general store on their way to the church. When Reverend Walsh pronounced them man and wife, Travis kissed Tessa with a tenderness that made her heart ache. This was real now. She was Tessa Cole, wife of Travis Cole, and no one could take that away from her. They celebrated with dinner at the town's small restaurant, and then they rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting. Tessa felt as though she were floating, caught between joy and disbelief. She was married. She had a husband who loved her. After everything she had been through, she had found something worth holding on to. That night, Travis carried her over the threshold of the house, both of them laughing. But when he set her down, the laughter faded, replaced by something deeper and more intense. Tessa reached up and traced the line of Travis's jaw, marveling at the fact that she was allowed to touch him like this now. "Are you sure about this?" Travis asked quietly. "I meant what I said before. I do not expect anything from you that you are not ready to give." "I am sure," Tessa said. "I want this. I want you." Travis kissed her again, slow and deep, and Tessa felt heat unfurl in her belly. He led her upstairs, not to the spare room she had been sleeping in, but to his own room, larger and warmer. They undressed each other with fumbling hands, nervous and eager in equal measure. When Travis laid her down on the bed, Tessa felt a moment of fear, old memories threatening to intrude. But then Travis paused, looking down at her with such open adoration that the fear melted away. "You are beautiful," he murmured, and Tessa believed him. They came together with a gentleness that surprised Tessa, Travis taking his time, making sure she was comfortable every step of the way. It was nothing like the violence she had experienced before, nothing like the pain and terror. This was soft and sweet, a joining of two people who cared deeply for each other. And when they finally collapsed together, breathless and sated, Tessa felt tears on her cheeks. "Are you all right?" Travis asked, immediately concerned. "I am perfect," Tessa said, and she meant it. "I am just happy." Travis smiled and pulled her close, tucking her against his side. "Me too." They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time since she had fled into the night all those weeks ago, Tessa felt truly safe. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Tessa's life. She and Travis fell into a comfortable married rhythm, sharing meals and chores and conversation. They talked about everything, their childhoods and their dreams and their fears. Travis told her about growing up on the ranch, about his mother who had died when he was young and his father who had been stern but fair. Tessa told him about her own family, long gone now, and about the hardscrabble life she had lived before ending up in the town where Thomas Wilkes had cornered her. "I wish I could have protected you from that," Travis said one night as they lay in bed, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "You are protecting me now," Tessa said. "That is enough." But even in the midst of their happiness, the shadow of the past loomed. Every time someone came to the ranch, Tessa felt a spike of fear. She kept expecting Jack Henley or someone like him to show up with a warrant and a pair of handcuffs. Travis did his best to reassure her, but they both knew the threat was real. It was mid-October when Travis came home from a trip to town with news that made Tessa's blood run cold. "There is a new sheriff in your old town," he said, his expression grim. "Apparently the old one got caught taking bribes and was run out. The new sheriff is supposed to be honest." Tessa's hand stilled on the dish she was washing. "What does that mean for me?" "I do not know," Travis admitted. "But maybe, just maybe, it means you could get a fair hearing. Maybe you could tell your side of the story and be believed. Or maybe it changes nothing," Tessa said, fear rising in her throat. "Maybe they still hang me for killing an important man." Travis came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "We do not have to do anything. We can keep living like this, looking over our shoulders, or we can take a chance and see if things have changed." Tessa closed her eyes, leaning back into his warmth. The thought of going back, of facing what she had done, terrified her. But the thought of living in fear for the rest of her life was almost worse. "What do you think we should do?" "I think we should find out more about this new sheriff," Travis said. "Feel him out, see what kind of man he is, and then we make a decision together." It took 2 weeks of careful inquiry, Travis asking casual questions in town and talking to people who had business in Tessa's old hometown. What he learned was cautiously encouraging. The new sheriff, a man named Robert Donovan, had a reputation for fairness and a strong dislike of corruption. He had cleaned house in the sheriff's office, firing deputies who had been on the take, including Jack Henley, and he had reportedly reopened several cases that he felt had been mishandled. "He might listen to you," Travis said one evening. "He might actually care about the truth." Tessa bit her lip, torn between hope and terror. "And if he does not, then we run," Travis said simply. "I have been looking into properties in Colorado. We could be gone within a week if we need to be." Knowing that Travis had a backup plan made Tessa feel braver. "All right," she said. "Let us talk to this sheriff, but you are coming with me." "I would not let you go alone," Travis promised. They made the trip to Tessa's old hometown on a cold November morning, the desert wind biting through their coats. Tessa's heart was in her throat the entire ride, and Travis kept reaching over to squeeze her hand reassuringly. When they finally reached the town, Tessa felt a wave of nausea. She had not been back since the night she had fled, and every street corner held terrible memories. The sheriff's office was a small building on the main street. Travis tied up their horses and helped Tessa down, keeping a protective hand on her back as they walked inside. The man behind the desk looked up, and Tessa recognized him from Travis's description. Sheriff Robert Donovan was in his 40s, with graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. "Can I help you folks?" he asked. Travis cleared his throat. "My name is Travis Cole, and this is my wife, Tessa. We are here about a case from a few months back, the death of Thomas Wilkes." Sheriff Donovan's eyebrows rose. "That case is still open. Wilkes was killed by a woman who fled the scene. We have been trying to track her down." His eyes settled on Tessa with sudden intensity. "You would not happen to know anything about that, would you, madam?" Tessa's mouth was dry, but she forced herself to speak. "I am the woman you are looking for. I killed Thomas Wilkes, but it was not murder, it was self-defense." The sheriff leaned back in his chair, studying her. "That is a serious claim. You have any proof?" "Only my word," Tessa said, her voice shaking. "Wilkes tried to force himself on me. I fought back. He would not stop, so I hit him with a skillet. I did not mean to kill him, I just wanted him to stop." "And then you ran," Sheriff Donovan said. "Because the old sheriff was friends with Wilkes," Tessa said desperately. "He would not have listened to me. He would have hung me without a trial." Sheriff Donovan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You are right about that." The old sheriff was corrupt as they come, and he did not care much about justice. He pulled out a file from his desk and opened it. "I have been going through his old cases, and there are some troubling things about the Wilkes case. For one, there were signs of a struggle in the room where he died. Broken furniture, torn clothing. For another, there were rumors about Wilkes, complaints from women that were never properly investigated." Hope flickered in Tessa's chest. "So you believe me?" "I am inclined to," Sheriff Donovan said carefully. "But I need to hear the whole story from start to finish. And I need to talk to some other folks, verify what I can. This is not something I can decide on my own." Tessa took a deep breath and told him everything. She described how Wilkes had hired her as a housekeeper, how his behavior had grown increasingly inappropriate, how he had cornered her that night and ignored her screams for help. She told him about the skillet, about the sickening crack of his skull, about the blood. And she told him about running, about the fear that had driven her into the night. When she finished, there were tears streaming down her face, and Travis had his arm around her shoulders, holding her steady. Sheriff Donovan closed the file. "I am going to be straight with you, Mrs. Cole. If this goes to trial, there is no guarantee how it will turn out. Wilkes was well liked by some people, and there will be those who want revenge. But based on what you have told me and what I have found in my own investigation, I believe you were defending yourself. And I am going to do everything in my power to make sure you get a fair shake." "What happens now?" Travis asked. "Now I do my job," Sheriff Donovan said. "I talk to people who knew Wilkes, see if I can corroborate Mrs. Cole's story about his behavior. I re-examine the evidence from the scene. And then I make a recommendation to the judge about whether charges should be filed." He looked at Tessa. "I am not going to arrest you today, but I need you to promise me you will not run again. Can you do that?" Tessa glanced at Travis, who nodded. "I promise," she said. "Good, go home. I will be in touch." They rode back to Ash Fork in a daze, barely speaking. When they finally reached the ranch, Tessa collapsed onto the porch steps, her legs no longer able to hold her. Travis sat down beside her and pulled her close. "You were so brave," he murmured. "I am terrified," Tessa admitted. "What if he changes his mind? What if they arrest me anyway?" "Then we will deal with it," Travis said. "Together. But I think Donovan is a good man, Tessa. I think he is going to help you." 3 weeks later, Sheriff Donovan came to the ranch. Tessa saw him riding up the path and felt her heart stop. This was it. This was the moment that would decide her future. But when Donovan dismounted, he was smiling. "Good news, Mrs. Cole. I talked to a lot of people, and I found several women who had similar experiences with Wilkes. He had a pattern of predatory behavior, and there is plenty of evidence to support your claim of self-defense." He handed her a piece of paper. "The judge has decided not to file charges. You are free." Tessa stared at the paper, unable to believe what she was hearing. "I am free." "You are free," Donovan confirmed. "There is no warrant for your arrest, no charges pending. As far as the law is concerned, Thomas Wilkes's death was justifiable homicide." Tessa burst into tears, and Travis wrapped her in his arms, his own eyes shining. "Thank you," he said to Donovan, his voice thick. "Thank you so much." "Just doing my job," Donovan said. "You folks take care now." After he left, Tessa and Travis stood on the porch, holding each other as the sun set over the desert. Tessa felt as though an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She was free. She could stop running, stop hiding. She could build a real life with Travis without fear hanging over her. "I love you," she said, looking up at him. "I love you too," Travis said, and he kissed her like she was the most precious thing in the world. The years that followed were good ones. Tessa threw herself into making the ranch a real home, planting a vegetable garden and sewing curtains for the windows. She learned how to help Travis with the animals, and she turned out to be a natural with horses. Together they built the ranch into something prosperous, not wealthy but comfortable, a place where they could grow old together. In the spring of 1884, Tessa gave birth to a son. They named him Daniel, and he had his father's eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. Travis was a devoted father, patient and loving, and watching him with their baby made Tessa fall in love with him all over again. 2 years later, their daughter was born, a tiny thing with a powerful set of lungs. They named her Grace, and she completed their family in a way that Tessa had not known was missing. Life on the ranch was not always easy. There were droughts and hard winters, sick animals and lean times. But Travis and Tessa faced everything together, their love only growing stronger with each passing year. On their 10th anniversary, Travis gave Tessa a locket with pictures of their children inside, and she cried happy tears. "I never thought I would have this," she said, looking around at their home, at their children playing in the yard, at the life they had built from nothing. "I never thought I deserved it." "You deserve everything good in this world," Travis said, pulling her close. "And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it." As the years went on, Daniel grew into a strong, capable young man who loved working the ranch alongside his father. Grace was wild and spirited, always getting into mischief but with a heart as big as the Arizona sky. They added more animals, more land, and eventually hired a couple of ranch hands to help with the work. Tessa never forgot where she had come from, the desperation that had driven her to hide in Travis's barn all those years ago. She made it a point to help other women in difficult situations, offering work or shelter to those who needed it. Travis supported her fully, and together they became known in Ash Fork as people who could be counted on to do the right thing. On a warm evening in 1897, Tessa and Travis sat on their porch, watching the sunset just as they had done countless times before. Their children were grown now, Daniel running the ranch with his father and Grace married to a kind young man from town. There were grandchildren on the way, a thought that filled Tessa with joy. "You ever regret it?" Tessa asked, leaning her head on Travis's shoulder. "Taking me in all those years ago," Travis laughed, a rich, warm sound. "Not for a single second." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Tessa Cole." "You saved my life," Tessa said softly. "And you made mine worth living," Travis replied. He took her hand, his thumb rubbing over the worn gold band on her finger. "I love you. I have loved you since the moment I found you in my study, looking so scared and brave at the same time." "I love you too," Tessa said. "Thank you for telling me to stay inside." Travis grinned. "Best decision I ever made." They sat together as the stars came out. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life filled with love and purpose. The barn where Tessa had hidden for weeks still stood, a reminder of where their story had begun. But it was the house, warm and filled with the echoes of laughter and love, that told the story of where they had ended up together. Always together, years continued to pass in comfortable contentment. The ranch thrived under the combined efforts of Travis, Tessa, and their son Daniel. Grace gave them 3 grandchildren, and Daniel eventually married a schoolteacher from Ash Fork who Tessa adored like a daughter. The Cole family became a cornerstone of the community, respected and loved by all who knew them. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Tessa looked around at the faces of the people she loved, her husband still handsome despite the silver in his hair, her children grown and happy, her grandchildren playing in the same yard where she had once hung laundry with shaking hands. "What are you thinking about?" Travis asked, coming up beside her with 2 glasses of lemonade. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Tessa said, accepting the glass. "I am thinking about how that terrified girl who hid in your barn could never have imagined this." Travis smiled and raised his glass. "To second chances." "To second chances," Tessa echoed, clinking her glass against his. "And to cowboys who tell scared women to stay inside." "And to brave women who trust them enough to do it," Travis added. They drank together, and then Travis set down his glass and pulled Tessa into a dance, right there in the yard with their family watching and cheering. Tessa laughed as Travis spun her around, feeling young and carefree despite the gray in her own hair. "I would do it all again," Travis said as they swayed together. "Every moment, every choice if it meant ending up here with you." "Even the scary parts?" Tessa asked. "Especially the scary parts," Travis said, "because they led us here." As the sun set on their anniversary celebration, painting the Arizona sky in shades of gold and pink, Tessa felt a profound sense of peace. She had run from death and found life. She had hidden in darkness and discovered light. And she had stumbled into a barn, desperate and alone, only to find the man who would become her whole world. The years continued their steady march forward. Travis and Tessa grew old together, their love never diminishing but rather deepening with time. They sat on their porch on countless evenings, holding hands and watching the desert they both loved. They told stories to their grandchildren about the old days, though they edited out the scarier parts of how they had met. When Travis's health began to fail in his late 60s, Tessa nursed him with the same devotion he had shown her all those years ago. And when he passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 71, Tessa held his hand and whispered her love one final time. She lived for several more years after that, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She remained sharp and active until the end, still tending her garden and helping with the ranch where she could. And every evening she would sit on the porch in her rocking chair, looking out at the barn where her new life had begun, and she would talk to Travis as if he were sitting right beside her. "I miss you," she would say, "but I am grateful, so grateful for every moment we had." When Tessa Cole finally passed at the age of 76, it was peacefully, in the home she and Travis had built together. Her children buried her next to Travis under a cottonwood tree on the ranch, where they could watch over the land they had loved. On her gravestone, beneath her name and dates, Daniel had inscribed a simple message. She found shelter in a barn and love in a heart, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. And in the years that followed, the Cole family continued to thrive on the ranch, each generation telling the story of how it all began with a frightened woman hiding in a barn and a cowboy kind enough to say, "Stay inside." It became a family legend, a reminder that love could bloom in the most unexpected places and that second chances were always worth taking. The barn still stood for many years after, eventually becoming a landmark of sorts. People in Ash Fork would point to it and tell the story of Travis and Tessa Cole, the cowboy who found a woman living in his barn and married her, the woman who had been running for her life and found a home instead. It became a story about kindness and courage, about the power of love to transform tragedy into triumph. And on quiet evenings, when the desert wind whispered through the rafters of that old barn, some swore they could hear laughter, the sound of two people who had found each other against all odds and refused to let go. It was a love story for the ages, born in fear but matured into something beautiful and enduring. The ranch eventually passed to Daniel's children, and then to their children, each generation adding their own chapter to the Cole family story. But the heart of it all remained the same. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone. In the end, Tessa Cameron had run from death and found life in every sense of the word. She had discovered that sometimes the most terrifying moments can lead to the greatest blessings, and she had learned that a single act of kindness from a stranger can change everything. Travis Cole had followed his instincts and his heart, offering shelter to someone in need without knowing how profoundly it would change his life. He had found not just a wife but a partner, not just a companion but his soulmate. Together, they had proven that love could conquer fear, that trust could be rebuilt after betrayal, and that home was not a place but a person. Their story became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of love. As the 20th century dawned, and the old ways of the West began to fade, the story of Travis and Tessa Cole remained, passed down through generations as a reminder of what truly mattered. Not wealth or status or power, but love and kindness and the courage to take a chance on someone who needed it. The barn where Tessa had hidden for weeks eventually collapsed in a storm, its weathered wood finally giving way to time and the elements. But by then, it had served its purpose. It had been the unlikely cradle of a love story that would be remembered long after the last board had turned to dust. And somewhere, in whatever lay beyond this life, Travis and Tessa Cole were together again, their hands clasped and their hearts full, forever grateful for the day a terrified woman found refuge in a barn, and a kind cowboy told her to stay inside. It was the beginning of everything, the foundation upon which a beautiful life had been built, and the proof that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. Their love had been tested by fear and uncertainty, strengthened by trust and devotion, and perfected by time and commitment. It was a love worth fighting for, worth believing in, worth celebrating. And it all started with two simple words that changed everything: stay inside.